Hi, everybody. This is Kate Foggo, and that's Julie Hurt, and we are making light. So a couple of weeks ago, Julie and I were talking, I think it was off air, I'm pretty sure I didn't actually put it in the cut. And the concept of white privilege came up. And I felt a very visceral reaction to that. There's a bit of me that went, oh, here we go. And I've given it a sort of thought since then, because obviously we're trained now to jump on these reactions and try and examine in ourselves what brings that reaction up. So whilst on the one hand, I wouldn't say I feel hostile, I feel frustrated, I think, by all these conversations about race and color, mostly because, well, we can go into this, but there is a level of people jumping on the bandwagon about all sorts of things, making huge drama all over social media. I'm not saying that's not an issue, it's absolutely not saying that, but there is a sort of level of not, like, I won't say tiredness, but you know what I mean? It's like, oh, here we go again, like someone's making a big deal about something, why are we all stirring up trouble, stuff like that. But I appreciate, I've had a couple of friends that we talk about this, I appreciate that my ignoring all this stuff, and I was happy to ignore it, but that reaction in me actually surprised me, that I felt defensive, because I don't really understand why I feel defensive, but I do quite definitely feel a huge reaction when people talk about white privilege, possibly because I'm white. I don't know, but I don't really understand what it means other than it irritating me. So I know Julie is well versed in all of this. So I'm just going to fire I'm going to fire a lot of questions at her, basically. And now our intention here, I think we've both discussed a reluctance, or I've discussed a reluctance to talk about this, because I don't want to offend anybody, and it's difficult to ask questions without either sounding ignorant or offending people, and I don't want that. And it's one of the reasons why I hate all this stuff, is the way that in social media it seems to be impossible to ask questions without being condemned by someone. And you know, the thing is, we're not going to get past these things unless we're able to speak. So I want to prefix this whole conversation with, my intention here is not to offend, or if it is, I'll be quite clear about it, I think. But you know, just using the language and stuff like that. See, I've learned a lot through Drag Race about sexuality and stuff like that, and that's great. I just look on the phone and look up all these fascinating words about what they all mean, and I've learned so much through that. And actually, from what I can read about, because young people are so much wiser than we were, so all the sort of language says, if you don't know what to call someone, ask them. And I like that. It's like, just take your lead from that person. So I'll have to take my lead from Julie, because well, neither of us are of colour, but well, we'll just see where it goes. But just to prefix again, the intention here is just to explore and hopefully crack open some of those areas that people like me, who I consider myself pretty open-minded, I've lived in a lot of different cultures and stuff like that, I had a really reaction to that phrase. So maybe there's something in it, eh? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to let you set the intention here, Julie, because I'm not sure where this is going to go, but I know that you have probably a better idea.
Okay, so I will say, real quick background is, some of this is inspired by a recent podcast episode of On Being with Krista Tippett, and I will not get the two guests that she named on the episode. I can post a link in the show notes. That it's to that particular episode, but she was talking to an African-American gentleman and a Caucasian American woman, and they were talking about in order for conversations like these to go forward, it would be great if white people could talk with white people and talk this stuff out. And so that's what's inspired me to bring this to Kate, to bring this to Making Light. The woman that was on the show said that and I know this is now for us, we will not get this conversation right. It will be uncomfortable. It will be difficult. I have no idea what's going to happen either. But I just want to say that it has to start somewhere. And so for the greater and higher good of all, and as Kate and I being divine beings having a human experience, we're going to start and we're going to try and see where it goes and how best we can help. So that's all I'll have to say right now. But that's our intention, is just to begin and go from there, and not we're not intentionally trying to harm anybody. We're just trying to ask questions and make things brighter. How's that? Make sense? Good. Okay. All right.
So a couple of months ago, I think I have a friend who I swim with, and she is what you would call a person of color. See, that's another thing, Julie. When I was growing up, people
When
called.
was that? Like, what's the era in which you grew up? 70s, 80s?
I was born in 68, so I lived in Africa till I was 16. So I came back to Britain in 84, thereabouts. I would say in 80, when I was growing up in Kenya, you probably talked about coloured people. I don't know, did we call them coloured? Not sure. But I think by the time we came back to Britain, it was a no-no to call people coloured. When I suppose, my first job in Perth, and then we're moving on a bit, a few years, I worked for a lady who we would have called half caste, which was, I think she was half Jamaican, half British skin, half caste, which was a phrase we used. That had then become, that was a no-no. And she said, just call me brown. She said, I'm not black, you can't call me black, just call me brown. So she's quite open about it. But there are so many words that are jumping right in there, that are either in fashion or out of fashion or whatever. Now, I totally get that you shouldn't use terms that are offensive, but I do take, especially these days with social media and stuff like that grab onto that and then make it into something. And we were called Brit shit in Kenya. It was funny. I didn't care. Now, maybe because I wasn't oppressed, it's not the same thing. We used to call shops on the corner shop was always called a paki because it was generally Pakistani people who ran the shops. That's apparently offensive. If we get a Chinese meal, we used to call it a chinky. That apparently is offensive. Now, my argument is, not argument, but I suppose my point of view is those words were never used to be offensive, at least not by me. Paki shop was a shop that was a newsagent that was open all hours. Okay, to the Indian man that ran the shop, that was probably offensive because he wasn't Pakistani, he was Indian. But there's no malice intended, certainly not from my perspective, of saying, I'm getting a chinky tonight, or I have to go to the Paki shop. I just inherited those words, whatever. What I don't understand is why some words that are purely descriptive then become offensive. So going back to people of colour, I didn't even know that was okay again until recently. I was looking up some oils from Lush or whatever, and there was a comment by someone that said, this is a lovely oil on my skin. I am a POC and it's great. And I went away and looked up, my God, for the internet, what POC meant, person of colour, calling herself that. So I thought, well, fine, okay, so that's the term now. Is this somewhere to start, or is that just an observation about what words people use and why they are deemed offensive or not offensive? Why it's okay to use one word and not another word. And it seems to be about fashion as well.
Seems to be about what part?
As in, words go in and out of fashion about what's acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Yeah. Okay. So here's how I understand language as it pertains to words and labels of people. So Maya Angelou, one of my heroes, has a phrase that says, when you know better, you do better. So when I grew up, and I will say like in the late 60s through the 70s, so I'm talking when I was born in 67 and through the 70s, and my grandparents were still alive, and my grandparents were in central to Western Ohio, it was very common to hear my grandparents refer to particularly African-American people as an N-word or colored or whatever. That was I also knew though that was not, I knew that wasn't respectable. Those wasn't respectable language. And that's how they talked, that's how they felt. The way that I understand some of the words that you were talking about, like Paki and whatnot, and we just had a recent experience here where I live, and I can share it too, is that when those words were created, and you may not know the history of them, but in the last couple years, I've been reading a lot of history of racism and different authors and whatnot. When those words were created, they were labels put on people because of how they looked at a minimum, many times they would also be used as a way to categorize a human being, and then therefore in that categorization put them in an oppressive state. Either they couldn't have a job, or they didn't need to be treated with respect. So there, many times these words become loaded with history and how people use them as ways to push them down so that that other person, the one using the word, could come above and oppress. And so what's happening in what I'm seeing happen, and I think this has been going on for decades now, is that the words, people are uncovering where the actual origins of the word came from and the actual original intention. And while you may not have been aware of what the intention was, I wasn't necessarily aware when I was a kid what the intention was. Now people are becoming aware. And so when it's almost like with our work as intuitive coaches and whatnot too, when we understand where something started, then we're like, oh, we get awareness around it. That word no longer, that word and all that history comes forward, and it's like, oh, well, that's no longer an appropriate word, and I understand why. So,
but a word like chinky or packy, to me, packy is just an abbreviation. Chinky is just almost like there is a word for it where you make an affectionate name of something. I am describing, I mean, is it okay to say an Asian shop? To me, that if the issue is that you are identifying a category of people, then by saying it's an Asian shop, that's probably okay to say. But in a way, my meaning of what that shop is entailed in a group of people, i.e. people who tend to run shops like that. If they're Asian, it means they're going to be open late. It means they're going to be open. Do you know what I mean? It is describing a category of people, but not in a derogatory way, but in the context of that's the sort of shop it is, and these are the understandings we can have about this shop, that it's on the corner, it'll have all the essential things, it'll be a little bit more expensive than everything around it, but it's open all hours, that sort of thing. I don't see why words like packy and chinky becomes offensive. Don't get me wrong, I can hear that language being used in horrible situations, but you can just about, you know, any word that describes people.
Right. It's so for like Packy in particular, because there are a few celebrities that I follow that are English, but also of Pakistani descent. Tan
My flatmate was one, and she said, oh, it's all right, Kate, I'll call it a Packy as well. Because I suppose as soon as I said it, I stopped, and maybe that's the point. When she moved in and I said, oh, there's a Packy shop on the corner, I looked at her, appreciating that she was half Asian, and got that rabbit in her head like, look, I suppose there is some understanding there that that word was offensive, although not, you know, only when I said it to her. And she said, oh, don't worry, Kate, that's what I call it. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I've listened to so when I listen to people who are of that ethnic descent or that heritage, when they take offense to it, then to me it becomes off limits for me. Because many times what's happened when you look at the history of these words, the oppressor has come up with the word and labeled the oppressed with that word. And so instead of the people themselves of Pakistani descent, for example, coming up, if they even feel they need to have a word, that's even the bigger issue, is why do we as human beings have to look at so you and I and what we do, we know we are the divine having a human experience. We are all one. So if when that's the case, that we're the divine human experience and therefore all one, then to look at someone externally and put a label on them because of how they look, whatever the looks may be, color of skin, shape of eyes, type of hair, all body style, all of it, we're denying that divine light we're just denying the divine light instead, because we're trying to say, I'm better than you. And at that moment, you become separate from one another, and then you've lost your connection to the divine. That's ultimately like where I'm coming from. For me, like the word, when I listen to Tan France talk about that particular word, Paki, for him, his experience that he outlines in his book is that it was more than once used derogatory, more than likely used derogatory, and as
I agree.
As an insult. And so when words begin to take those that type of negative energy, we need to let those words, in my opinion, we need to let those words go. That doesn't mean, though, that we also have to at the same time ignore where they came from, why they're there. I mean, if I look at, Pakistan, right? India was a British colony, and then India went through the separation or the partition where it became India and Pakistan, right? I think that's the history.
I'm sorry, my history is rubbish.
Oh, so, and yeah, because and I can't remember. So Pakistan is Muslim, India is Hindu, and so there was religious issues with partition. Families were separated. That didn't go well, but anyways, but part of it also came about because of colonization of India from England. And you also lived in Kenya, which was also a colony of England. And so to me, one of the largest chunks of all of this conversation with racism and Black Lives Matter and everything like that is that, and it's even happening again in Afghanistan, where the United States, we've left the country as far as the military aspect of it from a situation that what we're not talking about here is a situation we created, because we didn't actually honor what the Afghan people want. Instead, we tried to put a US type of governance in place in a country that's not how they work. And we didn't even talk to people. So no wonder it's a mess that of course we created, but we don't talk about that part. And that's part of, to me, where the loaded words come in and the racism aspect come in, is we need to talk about how we created this. So we're coming up with words and we're putting them on people, but we're not asking those people, I don't know, and I ask, like, I don't even want to ask, doesn't even feel appropriate to say, do you like these words? Does this make sense to you? Like, because why am we categorizing anyway? Unless those groups of people, in an effort to create a community of like-minded, liked outward-facing types of people want to come together. I mean, we call ourselves intuitives or woo-woo people or whatever,
I suppose maybe, I don't know if it's just a bad example with Pakistani, because it is just an abbreviation for Paki, and Chinky was just a affectionate word for Chinese. I don't know of that being used in a derogatory sense, though I'm sure it has been.
Oh,
but
in the US, Chinky would be derogatory. Paki, in my opinion, is derogatory. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I suppose that's it. And I understand that if it's derogatory to those people, then we stop using it. But there's a lack of understanding there of how it came to be derogatory. To me, it's just a word. It's just anyway. Enough said about those particular words. I think in the bigger picture that, because as I went to school with all different cultures, and although obviously we were more affluent than the vast majority of the Black Africans there, I would say that I was at school with Asian families that were at our financial level, if not a lot richer than us, if it's all about affluence. And certainly when I was at secondary school, the vast majority of the Black Africans there were infinitely more affluent than I was. So I don't, they called us Brit shit. It's fine. It was funny. I never took offense at it. I don't think, I just don't think maybe that's it, because it was so multicultural. I don't think there was racism per se, because I don't think I ever witnessed any white people being racist against Black people at school or vice. If anything, they would be making fun of the white people, that we can't dance and we didn't do this and we didn't do that. But and we were shit at hockey. And I suppose we would say the Black people generally were shit at swimming, things like that. But it never felt maybe that's different, and maybe that's why I don't see. And to be honest, this is how ignorant I was. I didn't understand what sectarianism was, because I've lived with so many people of different religions that I didn't even know that it existed in Britain, and what a big thing it is, Catholics and Protestants, because to me, they're the same faith, because we were with Hindus, Muslims, it's like, but we're all Christians. What's the problem here? I didn't realize. I was at a Catholic school, although I'm Protestant. So maybe it's just my background that I mean, I suppose thinking back, my parents, not my mum. My mum's actually very good with people and very kind generally. My dad would probably make jokes of Black people and Asian people, but I don't know that it would be any different. I don't think it was because of their color per se. It would be because of other things, in the same ways you'd make fun of stupid people or fat people. I know that we're not supposed to make fun of anybody, but I never felt it was particularly about race. It was more probably social background, as in how culture stuff, how we did things, how it was different, and drawing it. I don't know. I suppose I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose when people talk about white privilege, I think part of my reaction is like, don't lay this all on me.
Say that again.
Don't lay this all on me. Like, whoa, I'm not taking the sins of like every white master that's walked before me, because I feel quite, whoa, hang on a second, I haven't done any of this. But I guess that's my initial reaction. And then my other reaction is I actually grew up in a society where we weren't top dogs. So I'm not sure, I think maybe that's why my perspective's different. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think as far as, wait, what was the first thing that you said? Because there not top dog, but there was.
Don't lay this all on me.
That you didn't cause this, right? You personally.
Yes, I feel immediately defensive.
Yeah. I'm just reading it. Yeah.
I felt quite, the first time that one of my friends mentioned white privilege, I actually remember feeling quite attacked almost. And I do understand that this is what made me say, okay, if you feel like that, Kate, maybe it's worth a conversation. I do get that reaction is the very reason why we need to talk about it, because I am suddenly put in a situation that I had no control over, and there's no background in it, and I do see the irony of that's exactly what happens with people of different race, that they are immediately labelled, and the other thing that made me realise was, if I talk about the times when I argue with Gary about men and women, it doesn't happen very often, but and I'll be like, oh, you don't fucking understand, you're not a woman, how could you possibly understand what it's like to be a woman? And I heard myself in my head saying that, although there was no conversation around it, but my guys must have brought it to me, because at that point I thought, okay, now I get it, because that's the same thing as race, isn't it? This is something you are born into, and you believe you are you, and nobody else can walk in your shoes. No man can tell a woman how she feels. And that's where I thought that no white person can tell a Black person how they feel. And that's what dinged in my head. You're looking all smug. But yeah,
no, I'm not being smug. I'm not being smug. No,
because you said that to me. You said, yes, we're going to talk about this. And I remember thinking, over my dead body, talk about this. Because I felt attacked. Why I should personally feel attacked. But I do. And I see that now, that's, that's big.
Yeah, I think... I know I have friends that feel attacked by when they say white privileged, or when they talk about oh shoot, now I'm going to forget what it's called. I completely blanked. When doesn't matter, when it doesn't matter, I'm not going to go there anyway. Yes, I have lots of friends that are upset by that phrase, and I've watched, there is a gentleman that his show started on Instagram. I'm sure it's much more. He's even written a book, Emmanuel Akko, and he does a conversation on Instagram called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. talk about a patient human being. He takes, and he's been on Oprah a couple times too, which are also fascinating conversations. If you have Apple TV Plus, I'm sure if you go to the Oprah shows, you can find them, where she will have people of several white people as well as people of Latin descent, and I don't know what anyway, Spanish descent, Latinx or whatever. I don't know what the words are anyway for that right now. I know I'm going to get that wrong. Anyway, one of the things he will say is the reason why white privilege many times bugs us is because we immediately feel like something's going to be taken from us. And we've been in a position, meaning white people have been in a position for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, the first African-American slaves were brought to this country, to the soil over here, over 400 years ago. And at that point, we were already messing with, and messing, probably not a good word, but we were already tangling with Native Americans who were also people of color. So, I mean, white-skinned people have a history of doing things to other people based on their race. But Emmanuel Akko will talk about
I don't think it's just white people, it's just whoever.
No, I was even going to go back to
be more powerful.
Yeah, from the dawn of time, we have human beings. Part of what we have been doing is finding ways as we continue to be this separate from the divine, we do this. One of the ways we do this is by oppressing people who are different from us in some physical way.
And whoever's strongest, for whatever reason, has that advantage. I don't feel, when I feel attacked, it's more that I don't see it as having something taken away from me. I see it as you're accusing me personally for sins that I am not guilty of. That's how I feel, and I feel very defensive that I am somehow in the wrong by virtue, of my color. So I do get that very feeling of being attacked is by virtue of my color is what other people are going through all the time. But it's not, for me, certainly about having things taken away from me, because I don't see it like that. I don't think I can't see a situation where they are taking anything from me by that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think here in the US, where that idea of things being taken away from us, well, there's two routes. One, there is the conversation around Black Lives Matter, and I think the reason why it strikes a chord with some white people that something's being taken away from them is because there's focus on Black Lives Matter. Well, what about all lives? Like, I can hear all these white people going, what about all lives? And it's just like,
I feel like that.
Well,
I mean,
yeah. And
no, just because my view, because I don't watch the news and that, and then suddenly there was all this about Black Lives Matter, and you're like, well, hang on, what have I missed? Why do Black Lives matter more than other lives? Unless you've been in. Actually. Well, apparently, I heard that the Black Lives Matter, the actual original name, was something completely different, and that it's been sort of hijacked by this conversation.
That I am uncertain of. I know that what I am aware of as far as Black Lives Matter is they are asking for awareness that Black lives do in fact matter. They're not necessarily saying we're the only ones that matter. That's not their point. They're saying in a moment of time, if you will, and for the US, after 400 years of the importation of slaves, of human beings that were of Black or brown colored skin, in this moment of time, we need to be aware that Black lives do in fact matter. So like I saw a sign, just a second, I saw a sign. There was a little girl that at a Black Lives Matter march. She happened to be African-American, and she held up a sign, and it says, I'm not saying that all lives don't matter. I'm just asking you for, in this moment, we are asking for your help to recognize that we too, in fact, do matter. Because what has happened in the United States through racism laws, the Reconstruction that stopped after the Civil War, slavery as a whole. There are rules and laws in place, particularly in this country, that we actually exported to other countries. That's another topic. There are rules and processes and things in place that now many people cannot even see that they still exist, where we have a continually disenfranchised, oppressed people of color, so that particularly white people could continue to thrive. For example, when World War II was over and African-American men fought right alongside white men and women, right, fought right alongside for democracy and whatnot. When those soldiers came back to this country, African-American men were denied home loans that white men were granted. And because right after World War II, we had the baby boom, we also had a housing boom. African-American men were not allowed to get home loans, just like white men were. African-American men were not granted education loans like white men. So there have been things systematically, consistently to this day put in place to just, and like right now we're facing voting right laws and restrictions against allowing people the access to vote in an effort to suppress the people of color vote, because people of color, there's becoming far more of them than white people in this country. And so we're becoming what they call a minority majority in this country. And there are groups of people, particularly white people, that are in power, that are continually putting things in place to not allow people of color the same access. Education is another one in this country where you can find pockets where people don't have access to education, and you can see it's based solely on color lines.
So are you saying that it's not, because I'm assuming you have laws to prevent anyone discriminating. So I don't understand. Are you saying these laws are coming, the law, like, so when you say Black people can get home loans, are you saying that it just didn't happen? It wasn't that there was a law that said we will not give Black people loans. It was just that they didn't get them.
No, there were rules and like loopholes in the rules in an effort to allow the discrimination of African Americans to be able to get home loans. So it's in the rules, if you will. It's in the law.
And now in these laws, but how is that? How, I don't understand. I mean, maybe I'm completely ignorant about what happens in Britain, but I'm assuming that it is illegal in this country to bring in any law that discriminates against someone.
It happens all the time, every day.
But how is it done? In a subterfuge manner, as in targeting like an affluent group as opposed to color? Like, I don't understand how something is worded in such a way that it can be enshrined in law but is targeting a different race.
Trying to think if I know I have examples, but I don't have the books here to pull them out. One place where I found a lot of this information is in Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, 500 Years of Racist Ideas. That's one book. And another book is Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. And they both go through the history of how things got set up to a degree. I mean, not expanse. I mean, it's not everything. There's also another book called Evicted that I forget who the author is. He mostly focuses in Milwaukee on how people are consistently evicted in a system that doesn't even give them the ability to get out of an eviction situation. They just keep finding a new place to live at a higher rate, and then they get evicted, and then a higher rate. The way the system is built by human beings,
intentionally
in a way to allow a certain group of people to rise above and oppress the other people. The way our entire systems are built, and that's why they say systemic racism, and because the systems in which we live, which is why also then the word white privilege comes to be, because you and I, because of the color of our skin, we can pass through these systems and never, very rarely get a roadblock because of the color of our skins. Whereas if we were African American, we would there's immediately a barrier because someone can take a look at us, a banker can take a look at us, a real estate agent can take a look at us, a teacher can take a look at us and make a judgment and then put us in a separate way. And that's okay. And it's not okay. It's just that there are systems in place that allow this to happen. And because many of us have been unaware, us being white people, I always have to define, per this Krista Tippett episode, to define the pronoun of we. Who are we talking about? But I'm talking about us white people. Because we grew up in this, we are unaware of everything that happens. When you see that, when you read the history and you understand the laws, like the law that we talked about a couple weeks ago, to end the medical procedure to end a pregnancy, that is actually specific. It not verbally, it's not written, but the way that the ramifications of that law bleed down, if you will, no pun intended, seriously, go into the culture or into the state, it will ultimately disappropriately affect people of color, because people of color tend to make 60 cents on the dollar of a white person. Women only make 70 cents, but a white woman makes more than a black woman. So if you've already disappropriate, is that the right word? Anyways, if you've already got inequality from an economic perspective, and then you put a law in place where you cannot have a medical procedure to end a pregnancy, and you're forcing people to go to another place, which means travel, which means money, but you've now taken these people, particularly of color, that are economically repressed or oppressed because of the systems put in place, that law is technically targeting them. And
right. So what you're saying is that and is this true of all the laws you talk about, in the sense that they may not be explicitly described as applying to a group of people, but the reality of circumstances around that and how it will apply, that would be true then of any underclass, as in financial underclass. It's not whether or not it's intentionally, let's forget the intention for a minute, but if it's targeting people who don't make as much money, that's not exclusively black, presumably. It wouldn't necessarily be black. So these laws are just basically unfair.
Yes.
Are you saying they are deliberately put in place to target the black people, or does it just so happen that it targets black people because it just so happens that in that state they are the poorest or something? I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking. Is this intentionally targeting race, or is that just the end result?
This particular law, I have read this particular issue, I have read that I don't know if it's intentionally, I have read that it does intentionally affect people of color. I have read that it intentionally affects people of lower socioeconomic standing. But I am
I'm aware of a lot of that in Britain. I'm not aware, with so many things, the people at the bottom are the ones that suffer because they don't have the privilege to get around it.
Yeah, to me, I mean, the Texas ending a pregnancy law has its own other issues. I think maybe a better it has so many issues of what it's doing. I do know that it's affecting, it's because you have the disparity in income to begin with, and so then it just goes from there. Plus, if a poor white, I mean, the thing with economics and skin tone is that the white person can still pass that initial test of white or black, and because of that, there is still a pass granted. This conversation that I heard on being was, a white person could put a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard, but the moment they get attacked or harassed for it, they can take it away and no one's the wiser because you're still white. I can still hide behind this skin and not have to deal with what anybody of color has to deal with on a regular basis, which in this country, England, is, get pulled over because you're African American. You can get pulled out of your car because you're African American. You get stopped on the street because you're African American. That doesn't happen.
And that's I think what the other trigger for me to have this conversation was, because that was what my friend said, is basically, you don't, because I'm like, I don't understand, I don't see this happening, because I don't see it. And she said, well, you wouldn't because you're white. And that's a bit where you go, and at first I was sort of like, well, but, and that's just it. I don't see it because I am on neither side of that ever.
Yeah.
Like I'm also pretty isolated and I don't follow the news, so maybe I would have more opportunity to witness it, but I don't witness it unless somebody brings it to my attention. So I was really shocked when she said that she felt that she was very aware of her color, because it just had never occurred to me. Like, it just didn't occur to me. She said, well, it wouldn't, would it? And
yes, and I guess for me, one way to approach this too is to think about, in any given moment of any given day, where is my life easy because I'm white? Where is my life made better because somebody of color made something, did something? I think about so many of here's my iPhone. This iPhone, for the most part, is made in China. People that, there's been a lot of news about, I think it's Fox Industries that was making iPhones and the conditions in which these workers worked, because I think I need an iPhone, and this consumerism culture and all of the things that I say I need, and I want them now, and I want them cheap, and I better have it good. And that creates a whole system of getting people to do things for cheap, for nothing, and it doesn't matter if they're treated well. And I don't even I'm saying I in like the larger group, but I don't take the time to understand who made this, what did it cost? Even to get the metals in here, the conditions in which the human beings work to get the metals in here. Like this, I guess ultimately part of what I'm also saying is we need to be aware of when we do something in this life, that we have an effect on another human being and have an effect ultimately on us, because we're all connected. That's part of what I'm saying. And so this, like, I would even ask, the school that you went to in Kenya, was it religious based? What was the name of it?
So the first school, I went through a lot of Catholic schools because it was a sort of cheaper paid education as opposed to a state school, which would have been probably 100% Black and Asian. Whereas I don't know what the proportions were at my school, but so we didn't go to I don't know if we were allowed to go to the state school, probably. My sister was a Kenyan citizen, I don't know, but obviously we were in private education in the sense that it was private. I know that it's public school here in Britain, they call them private school public, as in paid education. It was the Catholic schools, it was the convents.
Yeah.
But my secondary school was Imani, which was it was a school for Del Monte, Kenya Kana's employees. That was probably predominantly white, was it?
Was that probably an English-based company? And then the school,
I think Del Monte's American, I'm not sure.
Oh, Del Monte. Oh yeah, it's American. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I guess like you're in Kenya, which is Africa, which is its own culture, and you were in a school built by a Roman white-based culture, Christian culture, right? Well, yeah, and this isn't to make you upset. This isn't to make, but it's to make you aware of like how it all kind of starts and how it permeates everything in our lives. This idea of white privilege, Catholics came, like they did that here too, and I was raised Catholic, came here to the United States and decided we called Native Americans savages and we were going to convert them. And now we're all looking, going, well, wait a minute, look at all the things they knew. Then Alaska, they have a master's program now where they're including indigenous wisdom on the management or the farming of fish, so that we have a better understanding of how best to harvest. And it's like, duh, and it took us that long. So anyways, but that's what I'm saying. Like when you look at what your background is, or my, when I look at my background, I can see like, oh, wait a minute, I can see why I see why my grandfather would have called African Americans N-words, but I can also see that they were actually, there's this whole thing about the northern migration of that's a whole nother topic anyway, but it was just so ingrained in him to continually look down upon African Americans in an effort to keep him, and he didn't, I don't even know if I don't know, I can't talk to him, I can't ask him about it, but yeah. I have parts of my family that'll tell you that'll continually say that word, and it'd be interesting to have a conversation with them about why. They're human being. They're us. They're the same as us. I don't know. It's hard, but you need to probably deal with your chickens.
No, excuse me a minute. Someone at the door. Sorry, I try to ignore them, but they see me, so they.
Oh.
Because I just sit looking out and I can see him sort of, like, just leave it there. I totally get that all our ancestors have done horrible things. I totally get that, and everything they did in Africa and everything was all about profit. And I mean, some of them might have been, you look at I'm afraid my history is shit. That's because I learned about the slave trade, ha ha ha, because I learned African history. Even the missionaries, okay, one would hope, however damaging they were, they thought they were doing the right thing. I feel very strongly about all of that, and I totally see that even now. I suppose it's just is it about race? Well, I think it just ends up being about, I mean, when you talk about Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, that becomes a race thing. But I think this thing of dominating people and using people for your own ends, I don't think that's about race. I just think that's whoever clambered to the top and however they did it. Because when you say, I mean, I'll be honest, in Scotland, we don't have a huge population of non-white people, at least I don't see them. And I live in a little village. It's probably, I would say, 110% white. In Edinburgh, even then, not, well, maybe it's changed. When I was at university, I would doubt there was 10% non-white people there, if that even. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe, no idea. Maybe foreigners just don't want to come here because it's cold. I don't know. But they're just. I don't know what the statistics are. But so when you say like what in my life has, or when I have faced something because of my colour, I don't think I've come across that as an adult. I have been. I am more judged on the fact that I'm a woman, which fortunately for the job that I had, I worked for an American company, and actually being a woman didn't come into it. And I know I'm very, very lucky for that, because I know a lot of women in my situation, in the job that I was doing, would have been blocked for being a woman. I wasn't. There were nearly all the women. We were a very small percentage of women.
Do you know if you were paid the same as if a man had your job?
That would depend, because everybody was different. So you don't know. But I don't think it was about being a woman. It was more likely about the circumstances in which you came into the company, how well the business was doing when you got promoted. I was a manager, and I was never aware of any discrepancy between the women, ever, men and women.
You managed people? Did you manage people?
Yes.
Okay. So then when it was time for you to do pay, was that?
Yeah, it'd be irrelevant. Sex was completely irrelevant. Never came up.
Well, legally it can't, in this country, legally it can't come up. However, what I have witnessed is that men and women are paid differently for the same
Oh,
job.
and I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. I'm absolutely not denying that. I'm just saying that in my situation, I was very fortunate. I would also, but in general, any prejudice I've had would have been because I'm white, because I'm English in Scotland. I don't think anything else really. Like colour just hasn't come into it, race hasn't come into it. And the other thing I've noticed is I would notice now is I have enjoyed the privilege of being very well paid, and now I don't have a job. Fortunately, I haven't needed to borrow money, but the irony is when you're not earning money and you need money, so that came as a real shock, not a shock, but it was just something I had not considered, that I suddenly was not in a position where if I wanted a loan, or if people were always throwing money at me, and I've always been very, very conservative with my money, and I've never taken or borrowed money other than a mortgage, never done that, never had to, thankfully, never lived outside my means. And that's not a judgment, that's just the way I was brought up, and mind you, my sister was brought up the same and she's completely different. I and Gary are both of that personality, that we're very conservative with money. But it did occur to me that suddenly I couldn't get a loan or anything because I'm not working, I'm not on a big fat wage anymore. So to me, those factors are much more obvious, but maybe that is because I'm white. Also, I don't know anyone who comes across it, and I don't really know. I'm assuming there are horrendous issues in parts of Britain, but that's also been against like the Eastern Europeans that are coming over. So I don't see it as an exclusively race thing. It's more just, what's the word when you hate, not homophobia, what is it, xenophobia, and this fear of immigration and all of that, of immigrants. And yet Britain's in a bit of a state right now because all the truck drivers have gone home, and we're now running out of oil, and we're running out of everything because everybody's fucked off because we're not in Europe anymore. So there we go. So maybe that will teach people a lesson.
I don't know. Yeah, you could take any of these conversations and think about it in terms of, I guess I bring it back to the separateness from the divine, and that we're actually all one, and that yes, it has been going on since the dawn of man. That doesn't mean that we are hopefully in a position to do better, is what I'm hoping these conversations do, because when you understand the history of it and you understand where it came from and why, and that it still exists, that's the thing, that we have to come to terms with the fact that this stuff is still happening, it still exists, and it's done to categorize people in an effort for a group of people to win and the rest to not so much. And it affects everything. I'm watching here where I live, access to healthcare based on socioeconomic standings, access to education based on socioeconomic standings. It's like, if we're all in this together, then we need to all be in this together. And that's where I feel. And so, but racism to me is a big, huge, meaty topic because I'm white. And so there is a huge opportunity, because we're the ones in this country, we are the ones that, I would even argue in yours too, but in Western culture, we are the ones, the white people are the ones that started it. And
I agree.
Find a way to understand how all we put it in place so that we can untangle it.
I don't think it's one-sided. That's what I will say. I experienced from living in Africa and living with lots of different cultures, that the distrust such that there was, and there was, obviously, I'm just saying it didn't, it wasn't, we were all better, more educated, nicer, affluent, whatever compared to, so I'm not saying it didn't exist, it's just I was not on the receiving end of it. But the distrust is on both sides, and I think it's to hold white people responsible is because they happen to be more powerful. Like it could, I think if it was the other way around, would it be any different? I don't know. Do you understand what I mean? I don't think that white people are inherently evil. I think this is what comes of being in a position of power and needing to defend it.
I don't think anybody is inherently evil. I'm going to say it that way.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
I don't think anyone is inherently evil. When I read particularly Ibram Kendi's book, Stamped from the Beginning, you can see how there was a thread of people who happened to be white that intentionally put things in place to hold people of a different colored skin, regardless of Africa or Native American or Asian or whatever, consistently put things in place to hold people of color down.
And those same people, I think, have done the same with women, and they've done it with people of lower income. I think that exists everywhere. I think race is just one thing, basically, that people that seem to crawl their way to the top find a way, and it's this thing about lack of abundance, isn't it? That, you know, I've got to hold on to all of this because there's not enough for everybody, so I have to stop you getting it. And that's something that I've become a lot more aware of recently, but I don't think it's exclusive to race. I also find, as a white person, and maybe that's why it's important to talk about it, but like when you talk about Black Lives Matter, and I see a lot of people posting on Facebook about stuff like that, I find it, what's the emotion? It feels, now perhaps this is really, really wrong of me, but I feel like people just jump on this bandwagon because they want to be seen to be, you know, woo woo, oh, look at me. That's how it feels to me. It's like, are you really involved? Do you really understand? Are you really doing anything constructive? Like just slapping a sign on your Facebook page about Black Lives Matter or change your name and stuff like that. Those sort of movements like that, I am very, and that maybe that's very unfair, but I am very judgmental of, in that you know, that it's so easy to go, oh well, yeah, I agree, you know, and it's very fashionable to be part of that. Now maybe that's really small-minded and wicked of me, I don't know, but as someone who used to be, when I was an activist, I'd go out and we would march and we would do things. I didn't just like put a wee hashtag on the fucking Facebook page and call myself a, you know, a protester. That it's very, I'm suspicious of white people that jump on that bandwagon, and that is possibly, maybe that's something I should explore, because I don't really know why.
Yeah.
Because it's not that I don't think these issues are important. I just don't like people grandstanding about something that has become in the public eye. Does that make sense? I don't know, I'm talking shit.
Yeah.
Does it make me sound like a complete bigot? Probably.
So I feel like, okay, so I'm going to two things. So I feel like two things. One, everybody has a piece of pie, right? Is my theory. And as well as if you want to understand, then you have, like for me personally, I wanted to understand. So I started, I love to read and I love to research things, and I've always been that way. So to me, okay, so Black Lives Matter, it is a movement in an effort to make people aware that there is ongoing murder of African-American people by various groups, the police, Ku Klux Klan, vigilantes, and that they
still exist.
Ku Klux Klan still exists.
They still exist.
Yes.
Really?
They're affiliated with Donald Trump. Yes. Yes, the Grand Master supported Donald Trump, and yes, it's still a thing. You know, I get ticked about it because I don't like, anyway. So everybody, so my piece of pie is the minute I heard friends of mine go, why do Black Lives Matter? Every lives matter. I'm like, okay, wait, there's something here. So I did a ton of reading on where the movement started, why the movement started. There's Ferguson, there's the, I'm going to say the gentleman's name wrong, that was out jogging and two white guys came alongside him and murdered him. Aubrey was his last name. There's Trayvon Martin, who he bought Skittles and was driving through or riding his little bike through a neighborhood. Somebody decided that he shouldn't be there and killed him. This happens all the time, and we need to say their name, like Breonna, you know, that type of stuff. Anyway, so my piece of pie in all this is I need to understand what has happened and why, and how does it influence what continually happens or what is happening now. And so that's where I read all of those things, and I seek these conversations out because we white people need to understand what has happened, what continues to happen, so that we can figure out how we can do our part to stop it, make it better. That's my point.
So-
That's my biggest.
And that's admirable, Julie. And a few years ago, I'd have been right there with you.
Yeah, see, so I would say that your piece of pie right now would be, you enjoy RuPaul's Drag Race. So you're learning about
Love it.
a lot, you're learning about a whole culture that it'd be interesting to see. I mean, RuPaul himself is African-American, or she is African-American. So you're learning.
Gary says, it's a man, because I call her she.
Well, RuPaul is she.
Because she doesn't like, a lot of drag queens have like a drag name. So when you're talking about the drag queen, you call it she, and when you talk about the person, you call them he. But RuPaul is RuPaul. So
But
I call her she.
RuPaul was the drag queen name, and his name
I don't know,
is,
maybe.
his
I
name
think his name is RuPaul.
Huh? Sorry.
I think he is RuPaul.
No, I think he has a name. I think
Okay.
they're both names. I'm not trying to anyway, you know what I'm saying? I think RuPaul is his drag queen name, and I think he
Right.
has a name, a different name. It doesn't matter.
The book I've got
Well,
written by him is RuPaul Charles.
Okay.
That's the name of it. But that's written as a drag queen, so maybe you're right. Anyway, yes.
Anyway,
So,
but
you
that's
see,
your
and I can,
yeah.
and getting involved in that is lovely, because although there are obviously very heart-wrenching stories of how people suffer from prejudice. I mean, the one I was watching today, this is actually in Canada, because I've run out. So I'm now on to Canada Drag Race. A man brought up in the Bahamas who was shot in the face for being gay, and you're just like, oh my god. I mean, I cry every time I watch it. But that's the thing, there's wee snippets. For me to read about the history of how all this awfulness exists in the world, Julie, I would be of no help to anyone, because I would get angry and I would get upset and I would get bitter and I would get hopeless about it. And that's why I suppose I come across as really ignorant now, because I now go, I don't want to know. I don't want to know, because it upsets me and it makes me feel small and helpless in the face of all this fucking awful shit. So I would rather not know about it, because I find it abhorrent, and I'm absolutely gutted that people, I understand fear, and I understand fear makes people do horrible things, but there's a lot of stuff that you've just talked about that goes way beyond fear. This is anyway.
Well, I guess to that point, much of what has transpired, if not all, against people of color is based in fear. Everything white people we have done is based in fear. And I guess how can we take a look at things and make decisions based in love? And the world would be a completely different place. And it sounds naive and it sounds simple, but
I agree, but I sort of feel like the people, it's like all these things, it's the people who hold the power here are the people who are making money, or who are holding some advantage by keeping these people down. And that ain't you and me, it's someone else. But I suppose you need to educate the yous and me's I don't know. It's
so that the next generation doesn't make the same mistake. So that I guess my thought is, if I educate myself, then I know where my cell phone was made and who made it. And do I really need another one? Do I have to upgrade this?
You see, that's another whole conversation, because there's going to be people who would argue, well, okay, so don't buy a cell phone. Now that child has no work and the family doesn't eat. There's that side of it as well. It's like with recycling and stuff like that, the people that need to be held accountable are not you and I, but the people who are making the money doing this. That's sort of where I'm at. And that's not to say that I don't have to take responsibility for the choices that I make. It's more of the line of, I feel like the people who are making money one way or the other, or gaining power through this activity, they're the ones that have the power to change. But then the flip side of that is, why would they change? They have no incentive to change.
And I think change can begin anywhere. Like I look at Greta Thunberg, I can never see her. The young woman from Sweden and the revolution she has started. I look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he was a preacher in Memphis, Tennessee, and look what he started. It starts from anyone, because we are all one. If we don't if we don't, if someone doesn't start, no one will. So,
Yeah, that's true.
you know, so I think that's probably a good stopping point for today. Thank you for joining us today for this week's conversation of Making Light, Two Humans Being. I'm Julie Hirt. With me, as always, is Kate Foggo. We had a really, I thought, interesting, engaging, in-depth, painful, hard to do, uncomfortable, icky conversation around white privilege, race, at least the beginnings of a conversation to see where things can go, how we can even make a difference and hopefully make the world a better place. At least that's my goal. And I'm sticking to it. So I hope you'll join us next time. Please do subscribe so that others can find us. Leave a comment in the comment field. Let us know what you think. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. All the information on everything is in the show notes below. And we hope we hear from you soon, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.